Hello, everyone, again. I'm Mike Whalen. We're chatting with our friends who helped us with the Lawyer Forward virtual event. Basically, these are watch parties. We're trying to recreate the dynamic of the small group sessions that we did before. So the idea is that we all get together in a room and we chat about stuff, right? I think it was Kim Wilson that put it, it's the Socratic method, only nicer. And so we're putting out to you guys the ability to pivot, bounce ideas around and think through some things. I'm talking about to Mary Juetten, and we're talking about money again. And Mary, I mentioned when we did our session before that this subject sort of gives me hives. And so I wanted to talk through some money stuff. Guys, I would remind you that if below this video, you can put questions, comments. I can drag them over. We can engage with them. I can ask them to Mary, and we can talk deeper. So generally, we won't go through the whole thing that we talked about in our session. I would encourage people to go to lawyerforward.com/virtual and sign up and watch it. But generally what we were talking about is cutting expenses and bringing in new money, like just really focusing on cash right now and to get as much control over the possible scenarios as we can. And so, Mary, what I thought would be fun in a sort of depressing way would be to talk through some scenarios as we wait for some questions. So if you're cool with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump us over to a couple of scenario documents that I've shared a couple times to try to help people think through this. So this one right here is from the Deloitte study, and I'm going to just go copy and paste that into our video real quick below. But this is from the Deloitte study that they were imagining 4 different scenarios based on a bunch of factors. The key thing to talk about in this scenario, they call it the passing storm. Point is, this is what they consider the best case scenario. And I'm just going to read, Mary, real quick from an assumption under the what we need to believe section. Specifically, this is assuming the pandemic is not that crazy, and this is assuming governments are pretty coordinated in their responses. What we would need to believe is economic activity rebounds in late 2020. Recovery is initially slow, but speeds up in the second half of 2021 as consumers become more confident. Meaning, in the best case scenario here, they're thinking it will take a year and a half for recovery to totally happen. If that's the best case scenario, tell me about cash position if you assume that, if you think that's accurate, that we're going to get to some kind of recovery in November, December, and then full recovery in the November, December after.
Yeah, and I think that comes from the idea that, it depends how you define recovery. So, if you think back to 2008 and, we crashed, and now, albeit that crash was, slower. This was a falling off the cliff in comparison. Mm-hmm. But then the recovery that they called the recovery, they have, they being economists have certain baseline metrics that say whether an economy is recovered. It's not whether you and I are back to our normal amount of work. So that's where they're saying it could take that long to call it recovered. So, as far as lawyers go, again, I'm probably going to say this 20 times. It depends, because certain lawyers are going to be busier than ever. We've already started to see there's going to be bankruptcy lawyers, there's going to be restructuring, there's going to be business lawyers. Business lawyers are going to have to figure out how to help these businesses. There's going to be family law. There's going to be a lot of that. So as far as kind of planning for your cash, I would plan the rest of this year in excruciating detail, and then assume that you would get back to sort of a little bit better next year. But I wouldn't, start planning renovations on your house unless you already have the money before and you don't need it. That's the way I look at it. And I do, sadly, even since we recorded this, which was last week,
right,
things have gotten worse, like negative oil and things like that, which I had to ask my husband about. I'm like, what does that even mean?
Right.
So
Yeah, and as we're talking about it, I'm looking through. So McKenzie also did a study, and their study is a little sunnier in that they see the possibility of a V-shaped recovery, and what that means is that it went down real fast and it's going to go up real fast. So I'm going to share my screen here again. This is the McKenzie study. And so these darker areas are what they think of as the 4 most likely scenarios. And what you see is like the bottom left is like the worst case scenario. It's just super long, major depression. We're never coming back, right? Like it's going to be it's a generational.
Well, some of us will retire.
Right.
Never come back.
It's a generational challenge. I mean, this is really bad, they're thinking. But the scenarios that they think are most likely are some kind of U-shaped recovery, that it's sort of slow, it dilly-dallies a bit, and there different levels of sputtering. But they do have the possibility that this is V-shaped, that we just turn the spigot back on and people come and show up. And the reason that I wanted to ask you about this, Mary, is I'm thinking specifically of, I've got a staff member, right? I've got somebody who's working for me right now, and I'm 3 months from poor, right? If I get no income, this is true of really 3 months would be really nice for most solo small firm lawyers. I've got 3 months of savings to keep my business afloat. And I'm making the decision about whether to keep this person on board. The difference in these scenarios feels really real to me, because if I think this is going to be a V-shape, turn the spigot back on in a couple months, I'm going to keep that staff member on no matter what. I don't want to go through getting somebody else. I don't think it's right to them for me to just drop them when things go bad. But if I think this is going to take a year and a half, some of these Deloitte numbers, I'm making a totally different decision about cash in the next 3 months. Like, how would you balance that? Would you assume the worst case scenario? Would you assume the best case scenario? How do you think through that?
So I think first of all, I think you do need to make different scenarios, and that's what I meant, planning in detail, like we talked about, is that you have to say, okay, if this, then that. So if my income is cut by this much for this amount of time, then this is when I run out of money. So you basically, it's like a startup kind of concept. You calculate your runway, like how long does that 3 months last if you make a whole bunch of changes.
Right.
And, like we talked about, some people might have X amount of money in their bank account, but maybe they've got receivables. Maybe they've got a different way of generating some revenue. So you have to look at it as a whole package. The other thing is there is the government assistance that's specifically set up to address exactly what you're talking about. They're saying, here's the deal. We'll give you this much money if you keep people on payroll. That's the deal, the triple P PPP plan. Now, as we were talking about earlier today, it's out of money right now. And we're recording this on April 21st, I think. I have to consult a device to know
what month is it. Yes, April 21st is today. Yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday, April 21st, per my phone. So I believe today something was passed to replenish that, and hopefully there'll be some more teeth in it to actually say, this is for small businesses. Unfortunately, the SBA, the rules are, if you're under 500 people, you're a small business. Right. And I saw, I try to spend very little time on Facebook. Just because people are irritating me on there, but
which, by the way, I'm going to share this with you guys just under this video. I got a message yesterday from Damian Reel of Fastcase. He sent me a tool that allows you to mute words on Facebook the way that you can on Twitter, and I may have just wet myself. I was so excited about the idea.
Please.
I'm going to totally put that in the comments to this thing, because we got to get this. The amount of non-experts having really strong opinions about this stuff, it's just driving me nuts. Sorry. So anyway, so
let me just
go.
Sorry. So people were complaining about, like, well, why did Shake Shack, who, very kindly, they gave their money back, but they gave their money back because they raised money another way. But people were like, well, they shouldn't have been eligible. It's wrong. And it's like, okay. And a lot of these people are lawyers, because I have a lot of friends who are lawyers and I'm just like, well, did you read the bill?
That's how it was written.
Did you read the rules? Because the rules were, it was specifically set up for companies. Like, we have a local pizzeria here called Barro's in Phoenix. They've been around since 1980. They're awesome. And they have many locations. So if you added up all their people, they might get to hundreds of people. But they need each location, if it's a certain amount of space apart, that would still have them qualify. So anyways.
Well, and of course, the employees who are working there are making $9 an hour and are the most at risk right now. So I kind of took that for what it was. But we'll talk about that stuff, the government money, in a second. But maybe a way to think about it is, so I was talking to Ed Kless this morning about value pricing, and this, which is a similar issue of, I'm trying to price the unknown, right? And one of the points that he made is it's really easy as lawyers to get into here's all the explosions that could happen and the worst case scenario, and I need to prepare for all that and charge people in advance because the worst case could happen. And of course the client's like, I don't want to pay for the worst case scenario. That's crazy. And so one of the things he said is, you might not know what's later, but you know what's next, right? And if your next thing is, I got to pay payroll in 2 weeks or whatever, then you figure out how to get to the next thing. I guess, so the government money that's what the government money is trying to do. It's trying to make it so you can pay 2 months and then we're going to reevaluate. And then if we get to that point and the economy is still crap, they're going to release more money, just like they just did. But I'm wondering how I make decisions about, for example, marketing. I'm seeing all these people talking about your marketing budget. This is not a time to tamp it down. This is a time for growth. Go chase stuff. How do you make that decision? Because sure, it's true, right? Like, if I can pay for Google attention because everybody else has backed off, it's cheaper right now than it ever has been. You're getting the most leverage from it because more people are looking at stuff. But like, that's not very me appropriate. How do I adapt that kind of opportunity to my cash position?
Well, it all gets back to, first of all, people like I'm just here talking to you today. I don't get anything out of this. I'm volunteering my time to do it. A lot of the people who are putting out these messages, they're not volunteering their time. They're working. They're marketing their marketing firm. Or, so you really have to be quite suspicious of people. There's like, not leaving the scams aside, but you have to take a hard look at what is your regular practice. Are you going to keep doing whatever you were doing? So if you're the kind of lawyer who is sort of necessary in the sense, or essential in the sense that, the business that you're supporting, if you're a business lawyer, it's still going. They're going to need you. So then why would you, it's not the time to try to grow your client base by a crazy amount. And, just to step back, it's always less expensive to upsell current clients or to sell additional work to current clients than it is to recruit new. So in this time, unless you are because I was an auditor in my past life as a CPA, unless you're like that necessary evil, I would not spend a lot of time trying to splash your name everywhere. First of all, just from my own perspective, it's crappy in a terrible situation to try to hard sell yourself. I don't believe that people really need to do that. Unless you were operating your law firm before at a, where you had no savings, you had no prospects, you weren't managing a pipeline, I don't think you start anything new. I think you keep doing what you're doing and look at marketing. Marketing is a variable cost. you have to look at in your scenarios that what is the return on that marketing investment? If I have been spending $10,000 a year for the last 5 years on marketing, hopefully I've evaluated, do I ever get anything from that? And yes, people are home more and they're on Twitter and they're on the social media more, but they're on there really not.
They're on there sad. They're not on there looking for a lawyer, okay? They're looking for a distraction. Let them Netflix and chill. Relax.
Except if you're a divorce lawyer.
Except the divorce lawyer. It's so funny. I keep going back to that one, as somebody who was a family lawyer. And, again, not to be a pessimist, but I hate to make false promises to people. I don't even know if that's true. Mark Homer made the point in a session we did on Saturday. He was like, post-2008, everybody was saying the same thing, that everybody's going to be really stressed and money's going to be tight and divorces are going to skyrocket. And the opposite happened. Divorce numbers went down. And I was talking to my wife today. I don't know if this kind of thing is going to make those couples finally say, okay, I'm out of here, or going to make them say, dude, we have to deal with each other. We're going to have to work some stuff out that we've been hiding under the bed for a while. Like, I have no idea is my point. And I don't know if I'm scenario planning, I don't know if I would assume growth in any plan.
No, that was just more tongue in cheek. But the thing about that is that 2008 was very different. It was the financial stress. Right? That was, and like many people ended up stayed together. They couldn't sell their house until they got foreclosed on type of thing. This is different. Like, this is financial for many, although we have to remember this is also, there are people whose businesses have not stopped,
right,
whose businesses have increased. Right. So there is that, but that's probably like on the 80-20 rule, that would be on the 20 side. But, the key here is that people are in the same house. Mm-hmm. And so people are complaining, which I have to tell you, I don't complain about it. My husband is on the other side of the world for God knows how much longer. So although I do think that it would be hard to be in the same house all the time.
Locked up with it. Well, and I do want to think sort of practically about how to make a decision. So you are not, as far as I know, a Profit First acolyte. Speaking of money, the reason, by the way, I like the book Profit First is because it makes decisions for me, which I'm a huge fan of. But I sent to you before the Profit First percentages, and if you guys are not familiar with the book, basically the argument is that what lawyers tend to do, what owners tend to do, is they take their revenue, they pay people, they give themselves what's left. And his argument is, that's stupid. The business is here to support you, so you should pay yourself first. Pay long-term profit first, then owners pay, then taxes, then your expenses. Like, your expenses should be and if you don't have enough money for expenses after paying those other things, then you screwed up your business and you need to go back and look at your expenses. So anyway, the point is he gives these sort of standardized percentages for where to put your money. And, the operating expense, we can get nerdy about what that top real revenue number is, but it doesn't matter. The point is, when you're thinking about your operating expenses right now, if you're normally at 30% or 40% or 50% for your operating expenses, my question to you, Mary, was right now, how would you change these numbers in this moment? Are you working your hardest to preserve profit and owner's pay, operating expenses be damned, or are you trying to maintain those operating expenses just to keep your business going and cutting yourself back in terms of personal pay? How are you thinking through those kinds of allocations?
Yeah, first, I agree with the whole pay yourself first principle. I just think it's so hard to put these percentages. Sure. And I don't disagree. I mean, I'm not a financial expert in the same personal budget planning, but from a business perspective, you have to divide, when you're doing your planning, you have to divide what you've committed to. you have to put that down, because it's nice to have percentages and you can say, oh, I got to pay myself first. Well, if you signed up for XYZ and you can't get out of that commitment, you're paying for that. So I think the philosophy would be to pay yourself first. So put owner's pay on there, put payroll, put owner's draw onto that little spreadsheet that's in the presentation. But I think, first of all, if you're taking pay, and if that's enough to cover your own expenses, then you can forego the profit side. Particularly since, like, those percentages that you showed me, on the smaller firm side, you're not really looking at that much profit. It's mainly paying yourself, and you're not trying to create this big business. So I think the first number is 50% for owner's pay or something like that.
Yeah, for somebody making under 100. So it's basically just you.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with, but you have to figure out if you can live for the next X number of months. You almost have to do the same budget exercise. Well, you don't almost. You have to do the same budget exercise for yourself and your family. And that's what everyone should be doing. They should be taking an inventory of how much cash they have. And it's cash and equivalents too. Like if you've got a money market fund, or if you've got something like that, you're not going to take a beating. But the other side of that is, like, maybe you need that money to pay your mortgage. And so you have to look at it from a holistic point of view, but you can't mingle it, never mingle it. But I think you cut your pay first, you cut your profit first, because you can just break even and still run a business. Right. And then you cut what your take home is based on that. And if this teaches us anything, that whole thing about having, like a rainy day fund and having a certain amount of savings,
all the things we wish we had done months ago.
Well, I am very thankful. My husband, I know it's not Husband Appreciation Day still, which
he's in Saudi Arabia. He's not watching this. You can talk positively about him.
He won't be. But I can thank him, because he is, like, extremely. He's not a lawyer. He's an engineer, and he's not an accountant either. But he's, like, does all of our financial stuff. He's extremely prudent, not super conservative, but, like, very prudent, and he has made sure so I can at least sleep about that.
Right.
There's other things that are freaking me out, but. So take away from this, once you recover, and I think we talked about this before, is once it recovers, build that fund.
And like I was thinking about that for right now. So you and I talked beforehand a little bit about the Dave Ramsey thing, and you don't have to agree. And by the way, I want you guys to put comments below about how you are raising money right now. What are you doing creative? Because we're going to talk about that. What kind of cuts are you doing? Specifically, I'm curious about this thing with employees, because I feel like people are making really emotional decisions about this and not being very rational about it, and it really concerns me. But anyway, we were talking about, so just put that in the comments below. We'll respond. The Dave Ramsey thing, one of the first things that he talks about is you've got to have $1,000 in the bank just for a total emergency, car breaks down, whatever. Then go pay off all your debts. Then come back to your emergency fund and make it 3 to 6 months or whatever his number is. And I sort of feel like, and he said basically, if the car breaks down and you have to take money from the emergency fund, you stop paying off your debts for as long as it takes to get that emergency fund filled back up. You need that fund. I feel like if these lawyers who are watching this have an emergency fund, you're in the minority. It's very rare for any Americans to have an emergency fund right now, of any kind of size, really. So you probably were already in a financially tight position anyway, right? You already didn't have a lot of buffer for dealing with this kind of thing anyway. Now you're making decisions about whether to keep staff or marketing dollars or expenses. Like, you already weren't prepared for it. Now you can't make that decision. I don't know. I feel like this is the time to tap into the emergency fund, not to build it. So I'm a little worried about investing in growth right now.
So I did some research a while ago for something that I was writing. The American has $322 in the bank. So not even the $1,000. And the average credit card debt is in the tens of thousands. And if you throw in, like ignore mortgages, but throw in car loans and all of those things. So that, as a sole practitioner, even if, it's just you, that's your personal side of things. And so personally, you should have that. I mean, the rule of thumb that they tell you is to have 3 months of expenses. And then you should have like little emergency funds. And the easiest way is whoever you bank with. A lot of banks will let you have a bunch of accounts and they're not going to charge you fees for them if you have like a certain amount of money in them, like $1,500 or something. So you create that rainy day emergency fund. So if it's already, so now we're in it. We're in the shit. So if you don't have it, you don't have it. But it brings up the question of, do you tap into your 401k? Because some of the government information is saying you can tap into it and then you can repay it later. So that is something that you can think about for your family. Like, to your point, don't make an emotional decision to take your personal retirement funds and pay your employees. Right. There is now unemployment for a year. Yes, it's not the same amount as your employees probably make, but you ultimately are responsible to your family. And I'm on a board of a, ironically, who basically in the first 2 weeks, half of their clients went away. Half. And the CEO of that company is very prudent. He's done we were on the call and he's like, yes, I've done 15 scenarios. And I'm like, really? Only 15? He's like super into doing the scenario, but that's what you need to do. Yep. You need to do all these what ifs. But he originally tapped in 2008. He tapped into his retirement to save his then agency and to pay people. And you know what? At the end of the day, he ended up having to let these people go anyways. And then it's all for naught. He wrecked his own. So it's taken him years to recover from that. So I think we can all learn from his mistake that he shared. He writes books and stuff. So he's shared this. I just think people should think long and hard about using those savings for their firm. If you pull it out and you use it to get through the next 12 to 18 months, you can always put it back and it has no impact. So that is a good option for keeping your house afloat, not your firm.
James Hucks points out that he's been virtual since 2017. So he's kept the expenses really low, which might be a slightly different but related conversation about, are we talking about money coming in or coming out? I did want to ask you about the government funds. My wife and I had this conversation earlier. So we've theoretically, long story short, we've gotten two kinds of money so far that were just money, just handouts, not the PPP stuff because we're still waiting on that because we're a small business and Bank of America is the worst. But we've gotten two other kinds of it. We got an EIDL grant, so they were handing out $10,000, but it really ended up being $1,000 per employee. So we got $1,000, and then we're getting the people money, whatever it was, $1,200 per adult and $500 per kid or whatever. So let's say for me that's let's say $4,000 or $5,000, right? That's just money. That's just money to me. The reason that they're handing out that money is because they want to stimulate the economy. They want us to go spend money. They want money moving. An economy is not money. It's the movement of money, as I always tell my kids. And so they want it moving. Should I? If I'm getting, we'll talk about the PPP money because it's got rules tied to it. But that money that I'm getting, what would you do with it?
Well, I would preserve it. I would use it to, if you've got enough money coming in, from your regular business, that emergency fund, that $1,200, $500 or whatever, I would put it away.
Yeah.
I would not spend it. I know that's what they want people to do, but if you don't have your 3 months, if you don't have your money,
right.
then there are, this is the time when people who have money should be spending it.
Right.
And people that don't have money should not be guilted into spending it and don't have extra money. Not that they don't have money. Like if you don't have extra money, then don't feel that you have to spend your money. I'm not going to get into how whacked the U.S. system is. My daughter lives in Canada. She's a reservation manager at a hotel, and then also kept her part-time waitressing job. So both of her jobs were gone in a week. But within 2 days, I wired her some money. But within, I think it was like 2 weeks, the Canadian government's depositing. She's a single 25-year-old woman. They're depositing $2,000 every month for her. Mm. And so you apply for it, and it's sort of like a different kind of unemployment.
Right.
So
it's like a minimum basic income or whatever is what they're.
Yeah, they're just saying you need this much to live. Like, well, she lives in Whistler, so that's like the total amount of her rent before she renegotiated rent. But I mean, the U.S. has not done a great job about this, but we can't change that. So that money, my view is, if you're entitled to any money, if you can ask for anything, ask for it. The people that don't need it hopefully won't apply. We have to rely on humanity, which is a little scary after reading Facebook this morning.
People suck. Okay, that's what we know.
Yeah. But the government money that is grants, I mean, it's like it's when you're fundraising for a company.
Right.
Grant money is free money. But I thought of something. I wrote it down because I forget things. I go off on a tangent. But if you're struggling as an attorney with your firm, if you don't already have a mentor or somebody to bounce these things off of, find one. And, reach out to either through these type of groups or however, find somebody who, if you hate numbers, you can talk to them, or just talk to them about decisions, like you were saying, the emotional decision to keep people.
Sort of relevant to that, I was actually going to point out a book that is revelatory if you guys have the emotional space to deal with it. It's a book called Built to Sell. It's written by
the same guy who wrote Built to Last.
No.
Different guy?
Yes. John Warillo wrote Built to Sell. Built to Last is Jim Collins, I think. Isn't Built to Last Jim Collins? Anyway, point is, Built to Sell is basically saying you probably have a cash flow business. The example that they give in that book is a design firm, right? But it's the same as law firms. We have cash flow businesses. We're only as good as the next client, the next case, the next hour, right? Which is what my book is all about, is this issue. And we're sort of seeing those chickens come home to roost right now, because we don't have assets to lean on when the cash flow stops, right? We have a cash flow business. And so go read that book, Built to Sell. If you're going to start doing some firm redesign, because you have to, that's a really good guide for that. I did want to ask you, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and I was thinking about it, like the whole thing about, it's not the time to necessarily grow, but if you haven't done it already, another thing, and I should have probably put this in the slides, is the whole concept of a sales pipeline. And in the book that I wrote for Thomson Reuters, where I went through like 41 key performance indicators, there's a lot in there about pipeline and how to do it and how to use that concept from sales. And over the last couple of years, when I've talked to lawyers about it, it's putting what's swirling around in your head into a spreadsheet, or you can do it on a piece of paper, but you need to make a list of, okay, these are all my clients that I have right now. This is how much revenue I can expect from them. Okay, you're building your model of how much revenue. What about the pipeline? How likely am I to get these? And don't be overly optimistic today. I would tell people to, if you thought something was a 50% before, maybe drop it to a 25% now. Sort of do a little doomsday.
Because if nothing else, I mean, you've got to use George Saharis's analogy, you've got more hippos trying to get to the fewer marbles, right? So if nothing else, assume a lower close rate just because there's more competition right now.
Correct. So doing that pipeline is probably another good idea, and it will either frighten you, which would be unfortunate, or it might make you feel a little bit better,
right.
In terms of that. But I just can't, like as we talked about, it's so important that you go first to your receivables are the closest thing that you have to cash. It means you've already done the work and you haven't collected it. So
all right. Yep.
Go collect them. Sorry, I'm thumping on my desk here.
Slamming, pounding fists. Read your financial statements with all the rage she can muster. I did want to ask you about the PPP stuff. So that money, I'm going to totally talk out of my butt now so that you can correct me. As I understand it, you're borrowing 2.5 times your payroll on the assumption that you're going to pay payroll out for the next 2 months. And that 0.5 that they said is that's to be used for other things. They know you're going to probably use it for other things. But the portion, that 2 times number, they're expecting you to spend that on payroll for the next 2 months. And if you do that, it won't be due. You won't have to pay it back, right? This is just a way to redistribute wealth, as I understand it. And so I guess question 1 would be, I'm getting mixed answers on this, and you may not even know this, but do you have to use it for payroll? Can I get 2.5 times and then use it to pay off a debt that's hanging over me, or invest in something or whatever? And sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You had 2 parts to your question.
And then the other thing I was wondering about is if I do have to use it for payroll, can you reduce your payroll? Like, can you put people on part-time plans because I'm trying to make this 2 months of income pay for your next 4 months to make you feel more secure? Like, what wiggle room do you know of that we have with the PPP stuff?
So with the PPP, the first thing that you asked about, it's a calculation. There's a very confusing note thing that came out on it because, of course, they launched it and then hadn't even told the banks how to deal with it. Right. So there's a whole calculation thing, but basically it's 2.5 times the payroll, and that's separate. It's not like you spend the 0.5. So what they said, the rules are you have to spend 75% of it on payroll.
Okay.
So
payroll in the next 2 months?
No, it's just it's like you spend 75% of it on payroll. Uh-huh. The people have to still be on payroll by a certain time. The other 25%, then you can spend it on things like rent and other things. I don't know about paying back debts. I don't think so. But that's my understanding of it. And I'm not sure if it's just automatically forgiven or if there's hoops.
Yeah, I think you have to certify. I think the last thing I read was later they're going to ask you to push a button to certify what you used it for. And in fact, they're trying to make it really loosey-goosey so that the banks can get that money back really fast, right? So if a bank loans me money, in 3 months they can say, hey, I really think this is going to be forgiven because they certified to me that they use this for payroll. Then the bank can actually turn to the government on that day in just 3 months and say, give us that money back before the loan, because the loan's not due for 6 months. You don't have to make a payment for 6 months. Before the payments even start, these banks can get their money back, which is crazy. Really good deal for the banks, by the way. Thanks, Bank of America. This was a good deal for you, and you took. Sorry.
So the other thing is that there is a forgiveness for your for half. Like obviously check with your CPA, but it's like if when I ran my payroll and the taxes that I had to pay were $1,000 a month, what I can do is I can get a break on that, and that gets reduced. And so the payroll companies like ADP, and then like I use Paylocity, and there's a whole bunch of other online. I also use Journey Payroll for another company. They had to scramble and put in all these codes because the way that you get the forgiveness is by reducing the amount that you actually send in to people. So that is something that I believe you also have to apply for it. So it's like the EDIL, and then you apply for a bigger loan, and then the triple P, and then this payroll tax thing. So it's a lot of things going on. The other one, of course, is then you can pull from your savings. But the key is, if you get the triple P money, it's going to come in. I believe you have to keep the people on the payroll, and you use that to pay them. So if in the end you fired everybody, then I think you automatically have to pay it back. And if you lower your payroll, then you might be on the hook to pay some of it back, like if you went to part-time. That's my understanding of it. But again, they keep changing. It's like the moving goalposts.
I love that, because as the attorney who's not your attorney, I get to say, well, the regulations just keep changing. It's not my fault I don't know the answer. I chose for my company. I'm not applying for any. I was like, no. I was just like, you know what? This feels problematic.
This feels very challenging.
So Jessica asked the question, and I think this is getting to maybe a bigger picture question about how much you bet on yourself right now and on growth in the future, and all these questions. So Jessica Dunn says, what suggestions do you have for those of us who decided to open a practice right before all this happened? As someone who opened a media company 2 months before this happened, I'm with you. She says, I'm 100% virtual, so costs are down, right? So it's not a cost question, which I do think a lot of firms, that is still a question. You guys need to cut your costs and be really honest about that. Renegotiate leases, get rid of bills, be really active with that right now. But she's talking about where to get new revenue. Where should I be investing my money in my practice? If I've got $1,000 from this or that, right? Even if I'm pulling it from my spouse's job or whatever to make this thing grow, she said the clients are very slowly trickling in.
What kind of attorney is she? Does it say?
Somebody else asked that. James asked that to Jessica as well. I don't know the answer yet. I think Jessica might be family. Jessica, can you answer that for me real quick? In the meantime, as we wait for that answer, that's a good contextualization, because if you're in bankruptcy, go put some ads out if you've got a little bit of money maybe, but you might not do that. She said primarily family.
And so did she practice somewhere else before, or is she like a new lawyer? Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, Jessica. Did you practice elsewhere before, or are you just coming out of law school? I think she practiced somewhere else before, if I'm not mistaken. But I did to get broader with that question. I wanted to ask you about, as Jessica answers that, I wanted to ask you about betting on yourself right now. I could theoretically say, instead of working 40 hours a week on my firm, I can go work 40 hours a week at Costco and then work on my firm 10 hours a week just to keep the thing going. Yes, it will make a lot less, right? But it's guaranteed. By the way, Jessica said she worked somewhere before at a small firm. She's a brand new solo. Okay. How would you think about that? Do you think it would be wise for Jessica to count on a new firm right now for the total amount of her income, or might you go mix it in, turn it into a part-time job, and get something that's more guaranteed?
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying this.
You can't say it depends. You're fired. You can't say that.
I'm fired. Okay. Whoa.
Terrible free advice. Get out of here.
No, I mean, if I was Jessica, I would be looking at making that pipeline, like we talked about. If clients are trickling in, family law is very much, as we know, it's word of mouth. It's like, when you go to get your family lawyer, you don't necessarily go online. So I feel like if you have a few clients that are coming in, then it's a matter of, where did they come from? Go try to figure that out. If you have enough that you can do your practice, then without going to work at Costco or a grocery store or a hospital or wherever, getting that kind of job, it gets back to very granular. If if you assume that the same amount of clients that you have right now, you will only have that number of clients in 3 months, can you make it work? And, one would hope that one client would be the same thing. One client a few hours a week will be the same amount of money as you're going to make at Costco. So it's doing like a trade-off. How much difference would it make? That said, maybe there's some other things like wherever you worked before, maybe they're super busy. So maybe you can go back and just start, not go back to work there, but maybe they need some extra.
Freelance.
Some freelance.
Right.
And then for all the lawyers that are out there, that is what I would do, is go and say, okay, where, like some of these platforms, some of them have disappeared recently, like Atrium and others.
Law Clerk is a sponsor, so you're allowed to mention them.
Okay, so go to Law Clerk. If you've been practicing for a couple of years, approach one of the legal plans. Legal Shield, drawing blank on other big ones.
Is ARAG?
ARAG. There, yeah. ARAG, Legal Shield. If you've been practicing for 2 years, you can sign up and you get, they have provider firms in every city. They're going to be very busy because it's an interesting way of practicing law. And it's a 25% discount if you get like regular matters for them. So, most lawyers would still be making money if they cut their rate or cut their flat fee by 25%. So that's another way of getting your name out there. You might meet other people that way. But freelancing, do mastermind sessions like this. Go find other people so that when you're out there, is it Jessica? I'm having
Jessica. Yep.
Sorry. If Jessica is a family lawyer and someone else is a bankruptcy lawyer, then if Jessica is talking to somebody and they're like, yeah, my business is going under too and my life, then referrals.
Yeah, I just 2 pieces of advice, Jessica, from the family lawyer who had to figure it out. One is, I think to Mary's point, I would take work that pays less than you would normally take, but not with your name on it. Meaning, I don't know that I would go out into the community and say, we're offering half off wills or whatever, but take court-appointed work when you never did before, or take freelance work when you didn't do it before, just to get some kind of cash. I would avoid mine because you don't want your name permanently tied to that. The other thing that I would say is money is a fiction. It is a construct. It's a social. It's not real, right? It's a board game. That has never been truer than right now. I have been broke before while trying to build my own business. I've never been broke with the promise of government money coming in to keep me afloat. So this is an awesome time, actually, to go totally screw some stuff up. So if I were in your position, one thing that a friend of mine started doing, she was doing COVID custody reviews, right? It was a product that she had never offered before.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
It was associated with, it solves an immediate need. It's associated with something that's getting eyeballs. You could probably get some press off of that. You can do them for $99 or something. You're spending a quick amount of time looking over a custody agreement, giving pretty canned advice. Try to figure out ways to productize, because obviously people hiring you for a custody case right now is super weird when you can't go to court. It's just a very weird time for that. So if you can figure out a way to productize, look at John Tobin's session in the conference. If you can figure out a way to productize and come up with some other way to sell something, I think this is a really good time to play, because worst case scenario, you go broke and you're with everybody else. This is a great time to play.
I do think that I 100% agree that you should not be buying ads that say Better Call Saul type ads at this point, or doing deep discount type work. Absolutely not. But I think people, I don't want to say they're over. There's some things that are just necessary evils. If people want to get divorced, they're going, they could go to Hello Divorce. They could do, go to certain legal providers, but there's still people who are going to need lawyers.
Right.
So.
Divorce is theoretically recession-proof. All right, cool. Mary, thank you. I would point out to you guys that in Mary's session, she shared some budget spreadsheets. I need to figure out how to get these things to post on the website. But there are things that you should be doing in terms of scenarios. Don't go crazy with it. You can easily curl up in a ball and go crazy. But map out a few scenarios and see if you can figure out just how to handle the cash part and control what you can. Like, seriously, don't freak out. There's a government backstop right now, which is not normally true. So it's a really cool time to say control what you can and let the rest happen as it may. Before we let Mary go, I want to point out to you guys, let me share the screen again. On the left side of the website, you can see there's events, and one of them is this Mother Watch Party. We're not watching mothers. This was bad branding. I apologize. But it is the mothership of the watch parties. And under this tab discussion, there's all of the different watch parties. I'm not sending you guys reminders of every single watch party. What I want you to do is to go into each of these that you're interested in and mark yourself as going. And then you'll get the alerts relative to the ones that you're interested in. So go do that real quick. And again, if you haven't seen these videos, go to lawyerforward.com/virtual. And you can sign up. Mary, you shared before some information for contacting you, but for people now that want to reach out to you, and talk dollars, what's the best way to get to you?
Yeah. So I think this was on Facebook Live. So my name, Mary Juetten. I'm the only Mary Juetten on Facebook, and the same spelling that you see there, at Mary Juetten on Twitter. That's a really good place. Just ping me on Facebook. Don't send me a friend request on Facebook because I try to not have 600 friends. But you can send me a Facebook message, and then I'll give you my email too. It's ME, which is for my middle name, and then my last name, and then at Tracklight, which has no C, so AKLIGHT.com. But if you go on Twitter and send me a direct message there too, or follow me, that would be great. Always to talk about the importance of cash, and I just can't tell you enough times, so I'm going to say it one more time. You look at your list of who owes you money, and that's what you try to do. You try to collect that first. Always.
Hoard your cash, people, not your toilet paper. I did go to Costco, by the way, last week, and they had toilet paper. So that was a big win. I would say that was a big ass win because that's funnier. Because it's toilet paper. Thank you, Mary. You guys have a good time. Don't forget there's a session later with Graham, and we're going to have more tomorrow. So we will see you guys in the virtual world. We'll move this over to YouTube, share it widely. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, dear.
Take care.